Welcome to another Wednesday's Word. Today we're looking at the Gospel of Luke and some of the most familiar stories that are in the Bible, the parable of lost things. Jesus is surrounded by religious insiders. If there was a clique in Jerusalem, that would have been them, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. These were the people who had it figured out. They knew the Bible backwards and forward. They had very scrupulous lives where they're even tithing of their spices. So imagine you're making spaghetti, you put a little oregano on it, then you give a little bit of oregano to the temple, you take a little basil, to the temple. Every little thing they were scrupulous about, but in their hearts were terrible areas of prejudice and distance from their neighbors. And so they're surrounding Jesus with these religious insiders thinking that he should join their clique. And Jesus is constantly talking to sinners and tax collectors. And when they confront him, Jesus begins to tell some stories. In the very first one, he talks about a shepherd who's got sheep. Now, for us, sheep are this quaint thing, but if you're a farmer, and there's a lot of them in the church, that's your livelihood. Back then, they didn't have 401ks. They didn't have trust funds. Property values didn't appreciate. Property was something you kept through generation to generation. So their wealth and the way to sustain their family was in their livestock. And 1 out of 100 goes away, just lost. And so the shepherd would leave the 99 and go find the one. And then the very next story is a woman who's got 1/10 of her income. She's got 10 gold coins or silver coins, loses one, and lights a lamp, sweeps the room. And one thing I noticed this past week studying this, and maybe it's because I'm doing data analysis at times, is that the math is getting increased. So picture the hockey stick of the value Jesus is putting here. You've got 1/100th, so it's about here. Then you've got 1/10. The very next story, 2 sons, one of them leaves 50%. And in that whole story, the father has a total loss. He loses his reputation. The older son rejects him. The older son never really was there. He was bitter toward the father the whole story. And so you could say it goes like moving the decimal point from 1/100th to 1/10 to 1. That God is showing the inflated value of humanity. Better than sheep, better than money, even better than kids is how Jesus values the lost. And that's why he came to save us. God so loved the world that in this way he showed us his love. But he gave us his only son so that we would not be condemned, so that he could save us. And that math sometimes gets me because living in America right now, we're dealing with inflation. You're seeing that things are now about 8.25% more expensive, gas, food, property values are going through the roof. And we can be academic, we can be frustrated when this hits our pocketbooks. But imagine the whole scope of the world and all of creation. And God saying, this is what I value. I value humans. And I don't just value the good humans. I value the lost humans. I value the ones who've run away, the ones who've rolled under a bed, the ones who have rejected me. I value them. And I'm going to go seek them. I'm going to go save them. It's humbling because we don't live this way. We live in a very religious community and in a very sheltered families often where people are not valued. We value people who are like us. And even non-Christian families and cultures are doing this right now. It's very common to talk about your found family, to talk about the people who agree with you, who like the things that you like, who share the ideologies that you share. And so we reject people who disagree. I've been the brunt of that. I've probably done it myself, where people will just kick you out of their lives because you hold a different view on abortion or on the salvation of Christ. They keep you at arm's length. And what Jesus is doing is saying, these things should not be separating us. God values all of us, not just the insiders. Now, there is a way to share the gospel. There is a need to change minds. We take every thought captive, the Bible says. We try to share the gospel and win people to Christ. But while we're doing that, we don't reject them. We don't reject them for their politics. We don't reject them for their lifestyles. We don't reject them for how messy they are. We try to love through all that. And in loving, we love our enemies. And there's an old saying that if you constantly love and forgive your enemies, pretty soon you don't have any enemies, only neighbors. And that's where I want to be in life. I want to be able to see that everybody is my neighbor, no matter how much they act like an enemy, no matter how much they've offended me, no matter how different they are ideologically, politically, spiritually, they're still my neighbor. And as a neighbor, there's someone I should love. So that's the story in Luke. And right this week, it's Holy Week. So we're getting ready for Good Friday, Easter Sunday. And all of this puts it in perspective because what's the cost? You can tell what something's worth by how much someone's willing to pay for it. People are willing to pay. It's called the opportunity cost. You go to Auntie Annie's at the mall. You can pay $5 for a pretzel, but they'll give you 2 pretzels for $6. In other words, people will pay $5 for 1 pretzel, but they won't pay $5 for 2. They'll pay $1 for that second one. And in the same way, Jesus shows how much value he puts on us by dying on the cross. The events of Good Friday, his humiliation, the unjust trial, the stripes by which we are healed, the spitting, the mocking, the crown of thorns. That's what he was willing to pay. He knew what he was going to pay. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't like, oh no, I'm on the cross. He went into it deliberately. His face set like flint, an old translation says, going to Jerusalem where he knew he would be betrayed, knew he would be handed over to an unjust trial, and knew he would die. All of this because he valued you. He values me. And so as we go into Easter, remember the incredible value God put on you, but also remember the incredible value God puts on those family members or friends or neighbors that maybe you're a little distant from. Maybe we can see them more like that lost son, someone that we're waiting for an opportunity where we can call them into the family, hug them, welcome them, and have a huge celebration because those who were dead to us are now alive. Those who were lost are now found. I'm alive because of Christ. I'm found because of him. Can't we share that with others? All right, that's all I got for this week. Send me all your questions. I'll be happy to answer them next week. God bless.